Let's go ahead and use what we've been learning now about the multiple sounds of a spelling and apply that to the long A sound. How many sounds how many ways can you think of that we have learned so far in this presentation to spell the long A sound? Once again, I'd like you, just for the sake of experiencing this like your students, to just limit it to the ones that we have been taught so far. And then I promise you we'll come back to those extra spellings that you're already thinking of and incorporate those. Okay, so the 4 spellings of the long A sound that we've learned so far are shown on the screen here. We have a single letter A. We have 2-letter A that you may use at the end of English words, 2-letter A that you may not use at the end of English words, and then we have E-A. There's a place for you to write these in your teacher training manual on page 107. Now, to help us begin to sort this out and to organize this for the students, I like to show students that E-A says A in only 9 base words. And here they are listed for you right on the screen. Now, one way you can help students to memorize these words is to have them create a silly sentence that incorporates each of the words. Or this would be a list that would be great to put on a word wall within the classroom so that students have continual reference to know that the E-A phonogram says long A in only these 9 base words. And is this a spelling that you should guess if you hear the long A sound in a word? Probably not, when there's 2 million words in English and there's only 9 of them that use this phonogram to say the long A sound. So now let's begin to break this down a little bit more systematically. How will we spell the long A sound at the end of the word? What do you think? Okay, you have your ideas. Well, before we test out your theories, I want to ask you another question. What does a single vowel A say at the end of a base word? Let's use this discovery method of teaching or learning to discover it. You have the word ma. What is the single letter A saying in ma? That's right, it's saying ah. How about paw? How about data? How about sofa? Spa and lava? You'll notice A says ah at the end of the base word. And this is summarized by the rule when a phonogram ends with when a word ends with the phonogram A, it says ah. Very good. So how do you think we're going to spell the long A sound at the end of the word? That's right, 2-letter A that you may use at the end of English words. Now, I like to use a chart when I help students to systematize how to spell the multiple spellings of sounds. And you can see an example of it on page 109, or you can see it on the slide. And what I'll do is I'll give students then some sample words to add to that column. This is very much like the spelling journal, but just isolated for that particular sound. So you'll see a list of words that end in 2-letter A as sample words. And I would encourage students then to collect more. Now, once again, this would be a great thing to put as a word wall within your classrooms, and throughout the year begin to collect words with these multiple spellings. All right, how is the long A sound spelled at the end of the syllable? All right, you got it? That's right, it's spelled with a single letter A. In fact, here's your tip. If you hear the long A sound at the end of the syllable in the middle of the word, it is always a single letter A. There's just no question about it. That is the only way to spell the long A sound at the end of the syllable. So you can see now that syllables are very important in English for spelling, and they're very important for reading and pronunciation as well. And they give us some really big clues as to how sounds, especially vowels, are going to be spelled. So that leaves, what is the most common spelling of the long A sound in the middle of the syllable? Now you'll notice I said the most common spelling because E-A often spells A in the middle of the syllable. Well, I shouldn't say often. It only spells A in nine words, so it's a very uncommon spelling. But the most common spelling of the long A sound in the middle of the syllable is 2-letter A that you may not use at the end of English words. And so we can add some samples of 2-letter A that you may not use at the end of English words to our spelling journal or to our chart. Now, there are a few more spellings of the long A sound. Take a moment and think, what are some of the other spellings of long A that you know of from English? All right, and here they are. We could have A with a silent final E. We could have an EI, as in there. We could have an EY, as in they. Or we could have four-letter A, as in 8. Now, out of these four spellings, only one of them is common. EI, EY, and EIGH are all very uncommon spellings. In fact, if you want to see a list of all the words that use those spellings, you can look in the appendix of Uncovering the Logic of English. It's also included on our fold-out reference chart, but you can list them all in a very short time. The only one that's common is A with a silent final E. And you'll notice this is a long A sound in the middle of the syllable. So now we've discovered that there's really only two spellings of the long A sound where we're going to need to memorize. It's going to be AI, or is it A with a silent E? And we've taken the amount of rote memory work and we've really narrowed it down, and we've helped students to focus in on exactly which place there could be confusion for spelling. Now, these are the words that you're going to need to play a lot of spelling games with and have a lot of practice for spelling so that students master them. And another wonderful thing about learning this way, when you learn what are the options for the long A sound, is now we can utilize our tools. As I speak around the country, one of my favorite things to do is to ask rooms of people, how many of you have ever abandoned a word while writing the perfect word because you couldn't get spell check to recognize it? And maybe you're laughing to yourself because you've had that experience. I've found it is almost a universal experience among English language speakers. And it's something that I think we all hide from each other too, because I don't know about you, but when I'm typing along and I couldn't spell a word so much that the computer couldn't recognize it, I felt shamed or I felt stupid. But when you know the options for spelling, now you won't often even need to utilize the system where the spell check looks up the word and gives you options. You'll be able to see, if you use that underline function, that it is misspelled and go, oh, it must be the other spelling of the long A sound. And you can put it in and it will not disrupt your flow of writing. In fact, this has transformed how I write and spell. I have this confession of I used to be a terrible speller, and in fact, so much so that, it was constantly underlined in red and I had to rely heavily on spell check. And now as an adult, now that I know the phonograms and rules, I can utilize my tools. Spell check becomes really useful. So if you ever hear the argument that we should not teach spelling, this is also really commonly said, that we don't need to teach spelling because we have spell check, you can now share why it's so important to know these tools so that we can effectively utilize spell check for English.